migrated over the years. Now they had
That
an
could have happened
encroachment.
there, too.
Now they have an encroachment.
That could have happened there, too. And it isn't that much.
But that's how it happens, because stone will
I
move.
know, we can depend upon Sam to take notes. We can depend upon Sam. Waiting for our recording
That looks like
secretary.
it's okay on the property line.
No, it stops just short of the stone driveway. Oh. They weren't paying attention what they were doing, or they were just putting it in there.
If anybody wants an agenda, there are some copies up here.
West Falmouth Harbor, okay. Nashawina.
It's right there.
So it's an-
Oh, Brian, those aren't the agendas. Oops. Oops.
I blame it myself. You want to read this decision?
Is that a building lot?
Probably not.
So that's just an exact
Yes, it is.
exchange for square footage, but it looks like it's
Well-
leaving out lot lines.
And if they do, this house is gonna built way up on stilts. I guess that's okay. This is right by the town dock, okay, I know right where this is.
Yeah, I thought maybe I'd wait until 5 after.
that's
Is that pushing it a little too much?
Look at the garage there.
The garage can go on grade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to rely upon Brian,
Yeah, I'll,
and we will rely upon Bob, and we will rely upon the enterprise if our recording secretary does not show soon.
look at the TV tape.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, we could say anything we want tonight?
No, Rich, you can't.
Okay, that's Hamilton's.
Well, I think I am just going to go ahead and start, and hopefully we will have our recording secretary soon. So, it's now 7:05 almost, and I call the November 5th Planning Board meeting to order.
Not big enough, huh?
First item on the agenda is the minutes.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the minutes of October 22nd, 2013.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained?
I'll
Okay.
abstain.
Okay. So Ralph is abstaining.
He wasn't here.
Okay. Next on the agenda is an approval not required that came in, I think Brian said today. Brian, would you like to comment on that, or is there someone here for that?
15 feet.
Mike?
Unless you want me to bill you.
Okay. You were hiding back there, Mike, I didn't see you, sorry.
My name is Mike McGrath. I'm a registered engineer and professional land surveyor. My firm prepared the plan that's before you. There's 2 lots fronting on Old Dock Road, and there's a swap of equal area to basically adjust the lot lines. I believe that it's entitled to approve not required because it has adequate access on both Old Dock Road and on Nashawina Street.
Okay. Are there any questions from the board?
No legitimate questions.
No legitimate questions? Okay, then I would need a motion, please.
I'll move it.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstain.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We move on to decision. The applicant is Generation AJW LLC, site plan review to convert a movie theater complex to a commercial garage, office, and 2 apartments on 2.95 acres with associated parking, drainage, and landscaping at 742 Nathan Ellis Highway, East Falmouth. And we are to the point of this action that we have a motion, so I need somebody to read the motion.
I will make a motion.
Okay,
Madam Chairman, I move that the planning board vote to approve the application of Generation AJW LLC under Article 39, Site Plan Review of the zoning bylaw for a plan entitled, quote, "Site plan prepared for Hamilton Tree Service in Hatchville, Falmouth, Mass., close quote, shed and sheets, prepared by Holmes and McGrath Incorporated, dated August 16, 2013, last revised October 14, 2013, scale 1 inch equals 20 feet, along with a landscape plan entitled, quote, Landscape Development, close quote, prepared by Hamilton Tree and Landscape dated August 27, 2013, scale 1 inch equals 20 feet, with the following findings and conditions. Findings. Generation AJW LLC proposes to convert the existing movie theater at 742 Nathan Ellis Highway to a commercial garage, office, and 2 residential apartments, along with associated parking, drainage, and landscaping. The planning board finds that the above referenced plans show that a fire hydrant, gates with knock boxes, and 14-foot wide internal driveway shall be constructed per the Falmouth Fire and Rescue Department's correspondence dated September 6, 2013. The board finds that the drainage and curb cuts have been reviewed by the engineering division. Curb opening permit shall be reviewed by the engineering division as well as Mass DOT per condition number 2 below. The board finds that the proposed change of use will result in a decrease in the number of vehicular trips per day, so no traffic mitigation shall be required. Likewise, the board finds that the change in use results in a decrease in the amount of wastewater generated, and an advanced denitrifying system shall not be required. Conditions. 1. The plan shall be constructed as approved. Any changes shall be reviewed by the planning board to determine if a modification of this decision is necessary. Pursuant to Section 240-183B of the zoning bylaw, no permit for full or partial occupancy shall be issued until the planning board is satisfied that the conditions of this approval have been met. 2. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall obtain a curb opening permit from the Department of Public Works, Engineering Division, and Mass DOT for the entrance and exit on Route 151. All work performed within the public right-of-way shall be conducted under the direction of the town engineer.
okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Now, discussion of the board, please. If there are any questions or further discussion. Okay, hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. Thank you. Thank you. Brian has requested that Robert Pina's request for a release of a bond be taken out of order. May I have a motion to that effect, please?
I move that we take the request for the release of 850 West Falmouth Highway out of order.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain. Brian, would you please let us know what this is about?
The good news is this development is complete, and we have a satisfactory engineering report. So I can recommend to the board that the bond that is being held in the amount of $27,500 to ensure completion of the work can be released. And ask the board for a motion to that effect.
I'll move it.
Second.
Okay, any further questions of Brian? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain. May I have a motion to move back to the order of the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
On the agenda next is Heritage Landscape Inventory Presentation.
Hi, my name is Eric Dre. I'm a preservation consultant who lives on Cape Cod. And in my capacity as a professor at Boston University's master's program in historic preservation, I've been fortunate enough to bring the Heritage Landscape program to Cape Cod to satisfy students' thesis or colloquium requirements over the past period of years. Falmouth is the sixth town with which we've done this work, and the three students, one of whom very, very kindly came down today to present it to you, worked extremely hard on it, and I think it's an excellent product. And she's going to be presenting it to you and telling you a little bit about what they are and how it might be of use to you moving forward. And I also just wanted to take an opportunity to thank the Cape Cod Commission and Sarah Korjeff and their mapping technicians for assisting us through all these reports, including this one, and the involvement of the Cape Cod Commission has been extremely helpful.
Thank you. Sarah Korjeff, Historic Preservation Specialist with the Cape Cod Commission. And I'm here just to give a tiny bit of background, but also just to show support for this project. As Eric mentioned, this is the sixth town on Cape Cod that BU students have inventoried for us, Heritage Landscape Inventory, and this is really part of a larger effort to try to inventory heritage landscapes across Cape Cod. But with each town that they've worked in, they've gotten a little bit better. I think in Falmouth, things worked really well. The students coordinated well with all of the preservation groups in town. They held several public meetings, and really you can see the report, which we have copies for each of you, is really put together very professionally. And it will also be available to the public very shortly on the Cape Cod Commission website, and I understand from Brian that it'll be available on the Falmouth website too. But this is, all of these reports that have been done by Boston University students have been following a format that was established by the State Department of Conservation and Recreation, really for mapping heritage landscapes across the state of Massachusetts. And I think we're really lucky to have been able to work with BU and get this level of quality report done for the towns on Cape Cod, and also without it needing to touch your pocketbooks at all. So with that, I don't know, Eric, do you have more to say? Or I'd like to introduce Mary Service, who's a student at BU, and she's going to make the presentation of the report to you tonight.
Okay, I do have a bit of a PowerPoint to help illustrate the Heritage Landscape Inventory. Is it possible to turn the lights down in here?
I can do that. How's that?
I think that should be good. Let's just see if I can get this. Turn the power on, that would help. Perfect.
Put that into the
A basic how-to.
might take a minute.
Okay.
Bus station,
Well, while it's setting up, let me.
someplace in Falmouth Heights, Falmouth Harbor. Guess he's well Falmouth.
While it's warming up, let me just say thank you so much for the opportunity to be here to talk to you tonight about this project. And again, thank you to the Cape Cod Commission, who continues to uphold the Heritage Landscape Inventory Program. I know I speak for Casey and Haley, who did the project with me, when I say that it was a wonderful experience to work here in Falmouth. And we thank the residents and officials of Falmouth who were so welcoming to us and helpful and enthusiastic about the work that we were doing. We're thrilled to be a part of this ongoing program and very happy to add Falmouth to the list of completed HLI surveys on the Cape. So in the interest of time, I'm going to forego talking about the HLI program and jump straight into the priority heritage landscapes that we surveyed and researched. If anyone has any questions about the HLI program or the methodology, please feel free to ask me after, because I could talk about this all day. So at the original community meeting that we held back in February, we identified 131 heritage landscapes, and from that group, we selected 22 priority heritage landscapes. In total, we surveyed 8 individual sites, 4 agricultural landscapes, 3 bogs, and 7 seasonal communities. The East End Meeting House was constructed in 1797 as an extension of the First Congregationalist Church. This vernacular building with clapboard and shingle siding was built with local oak and white pine using traditional post and beam construction. In the early 1840s, a steeple and bell were installed, and the building was rotated 90 degrees to its current position. In 1892, the Falmouth Jewish congregation assumed control and began extensive renovations on the site, including the removal of the bell from the steeple. The building is now an active synagogue, and East End Meeting House stands as a remarkable example of religious continuity and community cooperation. The town shares ownership of the cemetery with the Congregationalist Church, and the Jewish congregation manages it. There are no formal protective measures in place to ensure the preservation and longevity of this landscape, and there is no on-site interpretive information available to the public. Because its eligibility was determined in 1990, we recommend that the East End Meeting House and Cemetery be nominated to the National Register of Historic Places. CPC funds could be used to hire a consultant to prepare the nomination. We also recommend erecting informative signs and making interpretive material available to the public. Falmouth Station is the only extant reminder of Falmouth's significant railroad era. The Old Colony Railroad extended service to Falmouth in 1872, bringing hundreds of tourists and products to town, transforming Falmouth from an agrarian and maritime community into a thriving summer resort. The first station, was constructed in 1872 and was a basic wood frame building. 40 years later, this building was deemed inadequate and was relocated to another position on the property, and the current station was built in its place in 1913. Despite the suspension of the railroad, the building has maintained consistent use since then. It's an excellent example of classical revival style institutional architecture. However, its appearance has significantly deteriorated in recent years. The building is currently under lease with the Peter Pan bus lines and is owned by the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. And due to its current constant use, there is no foreseeable threats of demolition in the near future unless its current deteriorated state is not addressed. Absorbed moisture in the masonry has caused bricks to spall and break apart, and many bricks display effects of efflorescence, which is a sign of absorbed moisture. Large pieces of concrete have crumbled and actually broken away from the building, and many of the window casings have completely rotted through. The source of this moisture absorption needs to be identified and fixed sooner rather than later, and repairs should be made in kind. The building also suffers from a lack of regulatory and protective measures and a lack of signage and interpretation strategies. We recommend that the station be nominated to the National Register, thus providing an additional degree of protection with demo review by the Cape Cod Commission. Oddfellows Hall was constructed in 1856 as Falmouth Village's grammar school. It has been significantly altered from its original appearance and moved from its original location. Since its school days, the building has been used for several purposes, including as a community hall and an antique shop. The building currently stands vacant and has been recently selected for an adaptive reuse project to convert the building into affordable rental apartments. The building shows signs of being vacant. Cracks and other signs of neglect are evident in the building's facade, windows, and columns. Survey work completed on the building in 1989 and revision by the MHC in 1996 determined that the building was eligible for inclusion in the National Register. The only demolition protection in place is the 6-month demolition delay bylaw, which is due to Oddfellows Hall inclusion on Falmouth's list of significant buildings. Adding Oddfellows Hall to the National Register would afford the building another layer of protection, as the Cape Cod Commission has the capacity to review any planned demolition of a National Register property outside a local historic district on Cape Cod. Additionally, Oddfellows Hall should be rehabilitated, reflecting its historic alterations. Recent applications to the Community Preservation Coalition called for the rehabilitation approaches to the building that were historically inaccurate and could compromise the building's integrity. CPC funds may be used for the project, requiring that any rehabilitation or repair done on the building has to adhere to the Secretary of Interior standards. Another benefit to using CPC funds is that it could result in a preservation restriction being placed on the property, which would act as a little mini LHD just for that one parcel. And it would also prevent future inappropriate alterations. Falmouth should also consider installing a historical marker and interpretive signage. So this landscape is historically and aesthetically significant to Falmouth's town character. The Old Stone Wharf was constructed in 1817, serving as Falmouth's primary import and export center and the hub of all whaling activity. It was constructed of slabs of Falmouth pink granite, laid atop a foundation of logs, and the whole endeavor was orchestrated by Captain John Hatch, who was a significant and prominent figure in Falmouth. At the time of its construction, the wharf could support an entire team of horses to aid with loading and unloading, which is pretty cool considering how it looks now. Surf Drive Beach was one of the first beaches acquired by the town for public use. In 1944, the town began taking beachfront property by eminent domain for municipal for public use because they considered it to be a good municipal investment. And just down the road from Surf Drive Beach is Oyster Pond, which was one of the first areas of settlement in Falmouth. Settlement began there in 1678. And infill at the southern tip of Oyster Pond was necessary due to the railroad and the construction of Surf Drive. So all three sites together contribute to a really stunning waterfront vista that is unique to Falmouth. Unfortunately, none of these three sites have been surveyed according to MHC standards. In fact, the only survey form that exists for this entire landscape is a Form C for a marker or monument that exists for the stone marker that designates the area of Old Stone Wharf. But it's sort of obstructed and kind of hard to see. There's no established regulatory or protective measures to protect the landscape as an open space. Erosion and other natural changes in the environment could impact the landscape negatively. Additionally, the historical significance of these three sites is largely unknown due to the lack of signage and interpretation, especially along Surf Drive Beach and Oyster Pond. Efforts should be made to survey these three sites. Form H may be used, which is designated for parks and landscapes. We also recommend the installation of interpretive signage, as well as the employment of ecological educational documents and signage to educate visitors about the unique habitat of the salt marsh. Originally designed and maintained by Charles and Margaret Spohr in the middle of the 20th century, Spohr Gardens is a serene landscape consisting of 6 acres along the shores of Oyster Pond. More than 34 varieties of daffodils bloom at Spore Gardens every spring and summer. The cobblestones that line the path are from New Bedford, and a collection of historic anchors lines the shore. Following the death of Margaret Spore in 2001, the Spore Gardens Charitable Trust assumed care and management of the landscape under the stipulation that the gardens remain open and free of charge to the public year-round. Volunteer and fundraising efforts are spearheaded by the Friends of Spore Garden, which is a nonprofit organization. The lack of formal documentation on MHC forms and lack of regulatory and protective measures leaves Spore Gardens vulnerable. If eligible, steps should be made to formally nominate the property to the National Register. Designation awards a certain level of prestige and contributes to local pride and sense of place. If it's not already noted in trust documents, the organization should consider donating a conservation restriction to the town of Falmouth or the 300 Committee to prohibit future development on the land if the trust is no longer able to manage the property. In this way, the gardens may be preserved in perpetuity as a beautiful private garden open to the public. Trotting Park spans 25.8 acres of open recreational space. In 1896, the Falmouth Gentlemen's Driving Club built a half-mile trotting path upon a foundation of local clay and became home to horse racing, bicycling, and running events for the next several years. The west bank was used as a grandstand, and a judge's platform was erected next to the track, and sheds were constructed around the periphery to house visiting horses. So all of these contributed to a really active recreational landscape. Once the popularity of horse racing declined, seedling pines soon encroached upon the trotting path. In the early 20th century, a Portuguese immigrant family purchased the majority of Trotting Park, where they farmed strawberries on the land for more than 75 years, but they did so while maintaining the shape of the trotting path. Their descendants sold the family property to the town of Falmouth in 1995, and later the town acquired a neighboring parcel to make the Trotting Park original parcel whole again. Today, the landscape is one of the most popular recreational sites in the town, with soccer and lacrosse fields covering the inside of the track, which now serves as a walking path. The site should be formally documented using Form H for parks and landscapes, and a historic marker should be placed at the entrance of Trotting Park to educate visitors on its significance and history. The 16-acre mature forest was given to the town of Falmouth by the Webster family. Edwin S. Webster was a prominent businessman and served as president of the Massachusetts Horticultural Society from 1932 to 1944. Once considered as a site for a new school, the rocky terrain deemed the site unusable, and it's been an open space since then. The parcel hosts many species of trees and also a large variety of birds that are rare to Falmouth. The woods are unfortunately not protected by any sort of conservation restrictions. In recent years, there has been talk of possible development of the site for affordable housing. The site is currently zoned for single residence B, which means that if the town should choose to sell the land, the parcel could be divided into individual 40,000 square foot parcels and sold off one by one. Additionally, under Chapter 40B, it could be developed more extensively. So we recommend that the town grant a conservation restriction on Webster Woods to the 300 Committee, which would ensure its continuance as an open space. West Falmouth Harbor played a vital role in the development of West Falmouth from colonization to the present. Originally settled by Quakers in the 17th century, the shores of the harbor have seen a multitude of industries over the years, including farming, salt making, and shipbuilding. As the maritime industry declined in the mid-19th century and tourism began to take over, the shores of West Falmouth Harbor began to be built up with houses and estates built by wealthy city dwellers who were here for the summer. The surrounding area maintains a really wonderful and unique mid-19th to early 20th century feel to it. The houses are still very far apart from each other. They're set on large parcels and are separated by thick woods and dense marshland. A 2007 study identified excessive nitrogen as a threat to West Falmouth Harbor. This situation has reduced eelgrass beds, which is a critical habitat for many sorts of marine life. The Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection has recommended a number of measures to mitigate nitrogen loading, including on-site treatment and disposal systems at the offending site, and also the recommendation to install a permeable reactive barrier, which the Falmouth Water Quality Management Committee is currently considering. Additionally, we would recommend the installation of a historic marker to educate visitors on the significance and history of this landscape. So we grouped 4 agricultural sites as a thematic concern: Coonamessett Farm, Peterson Farm, Riverbend Silo and Cape Cod Winery, and the Tony Andrews Farm. Each of these sites has a really complex and interesting history, so I'll try to go over them pretty fast. Coonamessett Farm is a 20-acre family farm that is situated on land that has been agriculturally significant for a number of years. Although Coonamessett Farm was established in 1989, the land was part of 2 state-known and nationally recognized farms before that. The land, part of it belonged to Brayburn Dairy Farms, and the other part of it belonged to Coonamessett Ranch. And Coonamessett Ranch was a huge, huge endeavor for many years. Peterson Farm, which is below Coonamessett, is one of the oldest farms on the Cape. The Weeks family began farming the land in 1677 and continued to do so for nearly the next 300 years. They specialized in sheep farming and wool production. In 1949, the Peterson family purchased the farm and used the property to grow fresh produce that they used in their hotel, the Cape Codder. They eventually sold off the hotel and sold the land to the town of Falmouth in 1998 for a price of $3 million, and the 300 Committee now maintains the site. The same organization also maintains the Riverbend Conservation Area, and this land was also a really productive agricultural landscape for many years. It was home to a fulling mill as well as cranberry bogs for many years before Frank Williams of Winchester bought the land and converted it into Sunnyside Dairy Farms. And Williams is the one who built the silo that still stands on the property, a really unique one made of ceramic block. And unfortunately, this silo is the only remnant of a vast landscape of farm buildings, which unfortunately no longer exist. Across the street, the Cape Cod Winery also exists on former Sunnyside Dairy land. Tony Andrews, who was a Portuguese-speaking immigrant from the Cape Verde Islands, founded his farm in 1935, and there's an aerial view of it at the top. He worked as a cranberry bog worker in Falmouth for many years before eventually buying his own farmland and harvesting strawberries. And Tony Andrews allegedly is the one who developed the pick your own strawberry, which exists to this day. The biggest threat facing Falmouth agricultural land is the lack of regulatory and protective measures. Coonamessett Farm, Peterson Farm, and Tony Andrews Farm would all benefit from the adoption of an agricultural preservation restriction, which would ensure that the property be used as a productive landscape in perpetuity. In addition, neither Coonamessett Farm nor Peterson Farm has been formally documented with the MHC. Efforts should be made to survey these properties. And lastly, interpretive signage highlighting each farm's interesting history and contribution to Falmouth's agricultural landscape should be installed to educate residents and visitors alike. 3 networks of cranberry bogs were also identified as priority heritage landscapes: the Coonamessett bogs, the Wacoit bogs, and the Wings Pond bogs. Cranberry farming has been a part of Falmouth's economy for centuries, beginning with the Wampanoag Native American tribes. The venture grew throughout the 19th century, and by the mid-19th century had become industrialized. Farmers were able to create man-made cranberry bogs through manual manipulation, and it was a process that included the clearing of swampland, from the clearing of trees from swampland, the flattening of the land, digging water ditches, and bringing in sand. And through this manual manipulation, they were actually able to mimic the natural bog state that cranberries grow very well in. So we believe that it is crucial to protect these bogs as working agricultural landscapes. The bogs are largely ignored in terms of survey. They also appear to be largely ignored in town planning documents. Another pressing concern is wetland restoration projects. This restoration would disrupt the yearly ebb and flow of cranberry bogs that make the habitat so favorable to this industry. These working landscapes are also devoid of signage and interpretation, so visitors are generally unaware of the importance of cranberry farming to Falmouth's history. Falmouth seasonal communities are a defining element of its history, landscape, and economy. The rise of tourism as a result of the arrival of the railroad was paramount to Falmouth's economic recovery after the decline of maritime trade. As early as 1870, seasonal communities were constructed for an influx of visitors from around the country. Since then, the seasonal communities, many of which now house a substantial year-round population, have been a vital part of the economy, architectural heritage, and sense of place. Each seasonal community has its own unique qualities, but because they share similar threats and recommendations, they've been grouped together as a thematic priority landscape. In total, we identified 7 seasonal communities: Minot, Megansett, Chappaqua Island, Penzance Point, Juniper Point, Falmouth Heights, and New Silver Beach. In general, the amount of documentation of each seasonal community is insufficient. While Megansett and Minot recently received comprehensive survey, Penzance Point, Falmouth Heights, New Silver Beach, Chappaqua Island, and Juniper Point are lacking in documentation, with a scant amount of historic features identified and researched. None of the seasonal communities have any regulations stipulating design review for changes made to existing structures. This can have negative impacts for a community's historic integrity. As a result, historically inappropriate alterations and additions and incompatible construction dot the landscape. In some communities, modern construction has actually replaced demolished historic houses. Vandalism is also a pertinent threat. In March 2003, actually, while we were doing field work, one of Megansett's oldest cottages was destroyed by arson, which was really sad. So we recommend that documentation on these seasonal communities be expanded. Adequate documentation not only educates the public on a community's historical significance, but also informs the establishment of historic districts and determines eligibility for the National Register. Individual eligible properties are subject to demolition review by the Cape Cod Commission. We would also recommend the establishment of neighborhood conservation districts, which are considerably less restrictive than local historic districts. Finally, the implementation of plaques at the entrance to each community and on notable buildings can foster ongoing appreciation, education, and preservation of each community. So to end the report, we compiled a list of the top 5 priority recommendations that we thought were most important to Falmouth. And these are explained much further in the actual report. So at this time, I am happy to take any questions you may have. Yes?
I'm interested in the neighborhood conservation. Maybe a couple slides back. It was,
The neighborhood conservation districts for?
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, neighborhood conservation districts are they're sort of like local historic districts, but they are much less restrictive in the sense that only large-scale alterations, such as an addition or a partial demolition, are subject to review. Little things such as changing paint colors or your landscaping, I believe is subject to an advisory committee, correct? But it's much less stringent.
You can tailor it to the district. A lot of towns are adopting this. Cambridge in particular has done this very often if you wanted to look into it more deeply. But you can exempt review of windows and doors and siding. Typically the sort of little elements of a building that in a really pristine historic environment you do want to hold on to. But in these larger scale communities where a lot of change has already happened, likely in things like windows, it's more about the general massing and scale, and that creates the sense of place. And another benefit of neighborhood conservation districts is that they're treated as a general bylaw, so you only need a simple majority of town council to put it in place, rather than the 2/3 majority of a local historic district.
Yes?
This seems to be, I was going along with it great in a lot of areas, but the last couple of things seem to be an end run on a local historic district, which I know Falmouth Heights has voted down, and I know the people in Megansett, well, let me finish, please. Has there been a public, if this gets approved, does this come in place without the neighborhood having any say, or how does this process work? This seems to be, I don't quite understand it, especially use the term creating a little local comprehensive plan. Does that put the same demolition, the same controls on just one little property?
I'm sorry, a
Well,
little.
you referenced further a local LHD,
LHD,
was
yes.
that local
That's a local
historic district?
historic
I wasn't
district,
sure. So you are creating a local historic restriction just on one property?
That's
when
for
you
a
do that.
preservation restriction, yes.
And now, do the owners have any say about that? Or is this something where,
Well, this is just a plan, so none of this is
This is not.
being adopted.
how does it get adopted, and who approves it, and do the local people have a say? Those are all my questions.
I can answer the question. Again, it's a planning document done by the students. It offers the board and public policymakers a point of policy discussion such as you're having here. Obviously, it has to be fully vetted through that process. In this community, we always have quite the dialogue, and everyone's enfranchised and has a say. But we want to get the perspective from the historic advocates, bring in a plan, just as we get housing advocates bringing in a plan, and then we try to mesh them all together in our process.
I liked everything until I heard it said this avoids the 2/3 vote, and that makes it a simple majority, and that's the part I was concerned about.
Again, I think we don't need to get lost in the weeds about the procedurals or whatever. But
That's a
I think
big deal.
The plan itself speaks for itself, and it's something that we can use together with all the other planning documents we have. We can bring in the fresh ballots, we can have a full discussion, and see what happens. But I think it's a very
It's something to
important topic.
consider.
But it's somewhere to start, and again, we'll not get lost in the weeds here.
Rich?
Madam Chair, yes. Jim's getting a little too excited prematurely here. The gentleman made a slight mistake. We don't have town council here. We have town meeting.
I know, I said town meeting.
No, you said town council.
Well, I know you're a former.
Okay,
Yeah.
a town council like Barnstable has, well, a handful of people, 15 people, could ram something like this through, much to Jim's consternation. But here in Falmouth, it has to go through town meeting, where there will be representatives from the affected neighborhoods who will be strong advocates for the interest of that neighborhood, and a significant body of people doing that. So it's a little bit different, and I don't think there's that much to worry about at this level. I think it's very interesting to get these ideas for us to discuss. We're the ones that would then put something together, put it before town meeting, and it would be town meeting who decides it, not some small group of people who would be ramming it down anyone's throat.
Let me be clear. She mentioned that it was a change from a two-thirds vote to a simple majority, and that's my concern. That was her comments.
Well, again, we can discuss about particular methods of how it comes through. If it's a zoning article, it's two-thirds. If it's a general bylaw, it's a majority. Zoning law in Massachusetts, as you know, ranks 49th in the states, the United States, for its comprehensiveness and forward-looking methods. So we'll see what we can do about it. But I wouldn't, right now, it's a plain document, Jim.
No, I like the general idea until till all of a sudden it was encompassing whole neighborhoods and reaching out and taking hundreds of properties. And I thought it got a little stretched at the end, that's all.
I didn't see that.
But it's not taking.
Well, I thought they were saying you're going to take Minot, there's a plan of it, put it in, all of Falmouth Heights and all of Megansett.
No,
Did I not hear
They
that?
just
No, they're all
identified
separate.
those.
It's
But
not-
aren't they part of this? I must have misunderstood you. I thought you were going to say that all these neighborhoods are now historic landscapes inventory, and then if it is adopted, could be done under a bylaw, under a zoning change, whatever, just a bylaw change, which is a simple majority.
Well, again, this is not
You-
an actual law being put forward. It's just a
I must have
a planning
misunderstood. I
document.
thought I heard that.
No, I'm not sure if I understand what your question is, but what I think you're implying is that all of these communities would be combined into one?
No, no, I'm not. Just individually
Okay.
being classified. Now that we make them an historic landscape, it simply becomes a majority instead of two-thirds. And I think that's an end run around a process that's been going on for a long time.
Okay, I'm going to cut that
Okay.
off because I would like personally to express my appreciation, deep appreciation, for having something so comprehensive in one report, absolutely beautifully done.
Thank you.
It will help us looking forward to the future. The three of us are on the local comprehensive plan committee, a subcommittee of the planning board. And we have not yet dealt with the historic portion of it. So I think this is extremely timely and will be helpful in us when we're doing an overview of where we might like to head with things.
I'm so glad to hear that.
And I'm sorry, I think it's an excellent report, extremely well done. It's just the changes from property ownership that I'm concerned about, and taking away property rights. I think your report's excellent. I'm more concerned about the property rights issue.
I know you are. Ralph?
Yeah, a question maybe more for Ms. Kirchhoff. We're the sixth town, and so when was the first town considered for this?
The first town, was actually 3 towns that were inventoried in, it was about 4 years ago.
You know, because this is interesting to the general public, may I ask you to
Sure.
go over there? Thank
So-
you.
The first towns we did were Brewster, Harwich,
Dennis.
and Dennis, and I think that was around 2008. And then we did Eastham and Chatham, and now here.
Okay, and my next question is, how has it been received in those towns? And have they adopted and gone forward with the types of recommendations that you're presenting to us tonight?
Well, as you can see, it's quite a menu of options to consider, and different priorities rise and fall. But I have received a lot of feedback from the towns with which we've worked, and with whom I have worked as a consultant, and they have used the plan, they have used the recommendations in it to support proposals going forward before town commissions, and it's helped them guide their survey work, doing the historic inventory work moving forward. It's helped them make decisions about what to do next. So it's been very satisfying to see that a plan is actually being used and has been helpful to them.
Have they gone as far as adopting some conservation restrictions on these properties and possibly incorporating the historic things that we just now discussed about the area, the neighborhood
Conservation
areas?
restrictions.
Have they gone that far?
Some of them are being discussed. I think there are a couple of properties, as Eric mentioned. You know, there are a lot of properties covered in each of these town heritage landscape inventories. And I think in some of the towns, especially ones that were done first, they've had a lot of time to move forward on a few items. And I know particularly in the town of Harwich that they've thought seriously about creating historic districts in some of the neighborhoods that were identified as historically significant. And I think there are a couple of open space properties, agriculturally based properties in the town of Brewster that they've specifically pursued conservation restrictions on. And I think that's one of the nice things about these documents is that they're helpful to the planning groups in town, but they're also a good resource for open space and conservation groups because they can see that not only are there open space or wildlife and habitat interests on a particular parcel, but there may also be archaeological or historic and cultural resources to protect on that same property, and that can actually be a benefit to them when they're trying to pursue grant funding or other means of protecting a property.
My last question is, how close did the fairgrounds come to making your list?
I don't actually recall the fairgrounds.
Did you,
I could look in the final report, but I don't
I
recall.
actually have to remember if it's in the index of that were identified. It was a fascinating, process, and you'll read about the process, but there are 2 community meetings that are held, and one of the unique elements of this type of plan is that it really comes from the community up, so that it's not consultants coming in and deciding this and this and this are the most important to you. All these priorities were chosen by the members, the people who participated in the meeting. So I'm not sure whether they brought that one up or not.
It did make the list, but it didn't.
Guess who nominated that one?
Well, there was as you know, Falmouth is a fascinating town because it's a number of different villages, obviously, and that very much came through in this process, and we had to kind of steer people towards certain sort of neglected villages, and people kind of clustered around others, and so there's a fair amount of sort of favor for the area in which you lived, and I think that's interesting moving forward to try to make members throughout Falmouth aware of historic resources in other villages or parts of the town.
Thank you very much. I think, Eric, you got to consider an A+ for this one.
Already given.
Okay.
Bob?
I think these are great documents for us as a planning board.
Good.
I know that I've used the Cape Cod Commission's reports on things, the Buzzards Bay Coalition reports to give me things to think about and make decisions that we have to make. And I think this is a great first step because it does highlight things that people may not think about. So I think it makes us aware, especially those of us on the local comprehensive plan, when we start talking about these issues. I think it's a great resource for us. Thank you.
Good, I'm so glad to hear that.
Anybody else?
So you have this planning document now, you add it to your palette of information that's out there. You know, as a planning board, you hear from many sources and many views. You get projects, you just approve plans tonight. These types of discussions, these types of planning documents, either from the Boston University students or from your professional consultants, you need to mix into then your comp plan, strategic plan with the board of selectmen, have those policy level decisions that guide your professional staff, put together the regulatory environment to bring to town meeting. Because as you know, oftentimes you get the clash of interests out there, and you walk across in the middle, and we watch and we triage. So sometimes these types of documents start small, but they have large policy implications down the road. And we'll be talking about that a little more as time goes on here in the next few weeks. So I thank Eric and students and
Just mention one more thing. I'm also on the board of directors of the Coonamessett River, and I know we're pursuing funds to remove the old dam and change the flow of the river. And,
We'll talk about that.
well, I mean, this is going in direct conflict to some things that I know that are going on.
But, you know,
It didn't seem to mention it, it just,
that's why we have.
Just wanted to point it out.
policy documents and a robust discussion, and then the policymakers make decisions. And
I'd be chastised for not mentioning it by other people if I sat here and didn't do so.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much for this document. Pardon? Oh, do you wish to make a comment, Nancy? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that. Come up.
Nancy Hayward, West Falmouth. For 9 years, I have been a member of the Falmouth Historical Commission. This is an absolutely splendid, tremendous report. I would hope that this plan gets presented to more groups in the town of Falmouth besides the planning board. Because as a member of the Historical Commission, when this started, and I came to the first meeting where the sites were listed, I didn't view this as a project of the planning board. I came to the second meeting where the draft was given of this project, and I still didn't get that this was a program being done for the benefit of the planning board. I think it's excellent if the planning board incorporates it into their thinking, but I view this as being material which can be used by other groups in Falmouth, and that's why I feel that it should have a wider discussion and viewing and a presentation too. I don't know that Eric Dre and his students can come and give it, but always, but I think it needs to be widely heard in the town of Falmouth. And I'm very hopeful that there are a few people out there in the community listening to this tonight. And I think in light of preservation efforts, which are going forward, I guess I have a comment. We have 5 planning board members sitting there, and from 20% of the board, we have seen a reaction that is very typical of reaction in Falmouth when efforts are made by some groups to save this or that, or to have preservation efforts made in this town. And I'm very pleased that this plan brought up the effort, the mention of neighborhood districts, because I first heard of this about 10 years ago, and I knew that they did it in Cambridge, but it appears to require administration of some other group besides the Historical Commission. I will be leaving the Historical Commission at the end of next June because I will have lost my ability to be on the commission. All the things that were mentioned in this are so important for all different groups in the town to make use of, as well as the planning board.
We have been
Thank you.
assured that it will be on the town's website as well as the commission's website.
That's
so
excellent.
It will have quite a lot of dissemination potential.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
the question, have copies of this been delivered to the Falmouth Public Library?
not yet, but there's actually one last little change that needs to be made on the copy that you were handed tonight, but as soon as that correction is made, we can make sure that copies go to the town library.
Nice little plastic binder or something, and, yeah. That would help Nancy's concern there to get a wider public to actually exposed to these ideas.
Yeah, we'd be happy to arrange to have copies given to any entity in town you'd like.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's more than one library in town.
Thank you again for your presentation. Okay, time to move on. We have, as part of our parcel of documents here, potential agenda items for the joint planning board, board of selectmen's meeting.
And Joyce has put together a composite of items that board members have emailed into the office for discussion with the Board of Selectmen. The meeting is scheduled for December 3rd. It's a home game for the board for Tuesday night. Hopefully it's in your package. If you want to add or subtract to this tonight, I'll bring it to Mr. Suso. We can discuss that with Brent Putnam, the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, and come up with the final agenda for the 3rd. So we wanted to make sure that the board had an opportunity to discuss what we want to talk to the Board of Selectmen about, and then they would know your thinking and the whole time. So it could be a short discussion or a long discussion, whatever the board chooses. We're trying to keep it to a 2-hour meeting. So usually it's 2 to 3 topics, depending on how much you want to get into it, or it could be one topic, whatever you choose. We're thinking 7 to 9.
I actually didn't email mine in. I think I verbally told Marlene perhaps, I'm not sure, but mine are the Spring Bars Road and the Selectmen's 5-year strategic plan that I'd like to see discussed. And I'm not quite sure when you have such large topics, whether we're actually going to have the capacity within a 2-hour period of time to do justice to both of those.
Okay, so 2 hours, well, it goes 3, it goes 3.
It usually goes 2. It's usually pretty.
The 3rd hour can get.
So, do you want to discuss this and make some decisions tonight, or toss the list to the Board of Selectmen to have their crack at it, or what? I personally think we should narrow it down a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty obvious that the Spring Bars Road report has to be one of them.
Does anybody disagree with that? Okay. So we're all in agreement with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I can just comment on
Sure.
my suggestion, one of my suggestions. Their latest, the Board of Selectmen's latest strategic plan mentions, something that they're looking from the planning board. And so that seems sort of appropriate to me, that since it's from both of us. And I don't quite understand their projection of this, because they call for something to occur by December of 2012, which I think might have been a typo, because 2012 isn't even one of the 5 years that they're considering in this plan.
Brian,
Just
you
as a
have,
point of information for the board, the Board of Selectmen will be voting their strategic plan, their updates. I think they might have done it last night. So you'll have a new version of that document, hopefully tomorrow, take care of those types of issues, right, the typos. And my understanding is it's going to be more goal-oriented than task-oriented, more policy-oriented, instead of getting down to the turning the wrenches. It's going to be policy the town would need to investigate enhanced preservation of town resources, or whatever. But it's going to be more of that level, policy level discussion. And that document will be, Ralph, I was hoping to have it today, but for for sure before.
Well, you think then it's appropriate for us not to consider that for this upcoming meeting?
So I would. It'll be an iteration of that, but I think they're going to be taking out a lot of the task-oriented things. They put in there like a vision map for you and make it more policy-oriented. But I think it's a worthy topic. We'll have it well in advance of the 3rd, and for sure, the 2 elected boards need to have some of the discussions with regards to some of the things we're talking about, resiliency and preservation.
Well, as I recall, we had considerable reservations about going ahead with that vision map anyway. So I would think, even though I listed it as something that we might consider, I would think that there might be other things that would have a higher priority than that. Than something that somebody else has suggested here. So
So we'll
I'm not,
scratch that right now.
I would think, we could scratch that one.
Okay, so we'll scratch that.
Because,
What's the scratch?
Land use vision map.
Okay.
Okay. And then both of you would like to see the Spring Bars Road report. That's
Well, we
your
got it.
sole, no, as the topic.
Topic, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
we already, yeah.
So we're already, so you don't have
Oh,
any,
yeah.
what I'm saying is neither one of you had anything other in your listing.
I do have, an addition to 2 things. I read the report today, and I have 2 questions. Is it appropriate?
No, not at this point. You can ask Brian if you wish.
Okay.
Doug brought up Coastal Sustainability Action Plan, which I think we're not even there yet to be able to discuss anything.
Is that the same as the resiliency planning?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think we don't even have enough together, and I suspect the selectmen don't, to have it a topic of discussion. Yes.
One thing I would interject, with your permission, Pat, is that you are heading towards a very large level of effort with regards to resiliency planning and whatnot. You may want to bring that to their attention.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, but not for an in-depth
But
discussion.
Nothing like,
Laid on the table.
no conclusions have been drawn, but this community and many other communities, it's a really hot topic. We're working with FEMA. We've had some discussions with the Department of the Interior, and it'll be a very high-level policy discussion here very shortly. So you may want to just put that on there right now.
I understand that. You mean just introduce it, and actually this document that Marlene put together might be a very good thing to give to the selectmen
And I think
individually.
Perhaps on your agenda, you might have on your agenda, future agenda items.
Good.
And bring that to their attention, that you are going to be having a level of effort similar to the wind turbines. And that the staff is going to be devoting a number of hours to this. And it should be there.
But the reason I thought that it might be worthwhile to give this to the Board of Selectmen is some of the things that they're doing in their meetings might be informed by what Marlene put together to some degree.
And it also dovetails with some of the things that Jim asked for. You're going to get a little tutorial tonight about the nomenclature behind the flood hazard zones. Just so you know, Marlene also has the districts commission tonight, and they have a fairly busy agenda, so she's downstairs. Hopefully she can make it back up here to give the presentation, because she sure worked hard on it. I'm not up on my resiliency plan.
No, if she's not up here, we will have to postpone it, have to table it.
She has other duty tonight, but hopefully she can get up there.
Doug also suggested expansion of industrial areas. That's our bailiwick by zoning, I think. I don't know that we want to bring that into a discussion with the selectmen at this point, until we further define that, but that's my feeling. Does anybody disagree with that? Okay, evaluation, what?
See, that goes into land use.
Yeah, it does.
But it's a pretty big thing, and I'm not opposed to having a discussion with them, just talking about what we're thinking. See if they're thinking 180-degree difference, and then maybe we don't want to go there.
I think what I'd rather do, knowing what the three of us are doing, is further define
Okay.
what we're thinking of, and then bring it to the next joint meeting.
All set.
I think that would be
No problem.
a little bit more expansive, informative. Hey, just because I open my mouth and say things doesn't mean you guys can't disagree and say we're doing it differently, you know? Okay,
Again, it might be just for a future agenda item.
Yeah.
Let them know that you haven't given up. There's a little bit of a hiatus here, I'll let those proceed. And we'll be visiting that fairly soon. It might dovetail into some of the things we're talking about with regards to the redevelopment of Thomas Landers Road, all the town-owned land and the public landfill. Is, I know the EDIC is topical on that. Then with the engineers and consultants, you know, the use of town-owned land, whether it's for preservation or solar arrays, you know, these are decisions the town needs to make. They have assets out there. I think the two boards, I think it's a very worthy topic to discuss. How do you use these assets? How do you preserve them? How do you utilize them? Or even dispose of them if they're surplus? Is a really good high-level policy discussion the two boards can have, because you dictate the land use policy.
right.
And they obviously have custody and control of the property.
And that is a whole entity unto itself that,
So the use of town, you know, the use of town-owned land, and if you have land that has high value for solar arrays or high value for preservation, you know, the land use priority report that we did some time ago, 2007, we prioritized these parcels. We prioritized them for affordable housing, we're building some over here. We prioritized some for preservation, you buy the farm. We prioritized some for development. So it's a really important discussion. I think that's something you need to bring into, at least for a future agenda.
are you suggesting, Brian, that we put forth a list of future, potential future agenda items at this meeting?
Look, what you're working on, but I think obviously that just their strategic plan, and Sarah is going to give a presentation on the Springmars Road report, the commission staff there. Those two items alone will absorb a lot of time.
That's what I'm feeling, so I don't,
So devote those hours to those very important topics, and then say, but in the future, here's here's what's coming down the tracks, so they don't, you know, heads up. You're doing resiliency, you're doing preservation planning. It's going to come into concert with their strategic plan, which is a work plan about what we want to do, and then theirs is how to do it.
Jim.
It sounds like just at the end of our meetings, when we talk about future agenda items,
Exactly.
we could just lay them out right there, and that's a perfect place for them.
But when you meet again, these topics are going to be coming forward because you either have consultants working on it, or EDIC has their consultants working on things. So these planning documents are going to be dropped on you, and then, okay, we've got a preservation plan, we've got the development plan, we've got the housing plan that's going to be coming online. After we finish the preservation plan, and all this is going to come flowing in for your consideration.
I think for informational purposes, instead of just verbalizing it, I think it would help if we also have it on a sheet of paper that can be handed out to them. So
Sorry,
that-
Pat, I didn't hear what you
Okay.
said.
Instead of just verbalizing our future ideas, I think it would be helpful for their purposes that we have it on a sheet of paper
Oh,
that
yeah,
they
yeah,
can take
okay.
with them,
Yeah, okay. Right.
with maybe a little bit more explanatory,
Right.
so that it focuses our ideas on that. Okay, now Paul, his list is suggestion of improved input from the planning board. I'm not quite sure what he means by that. Does anybody, has anybody
I
talked
think
with him?
he's talking about other committees that should report to us, like the Design Review Committee. He feels is a committee that should come before us when there are projects that are ongoing, and so that we're not caught off guard.
Okay.
I think that's what he's,
My confusion stems from the use of the word "from" instead of "to."
yeah.
Okay. Next on his suggestion is development of the local comprehensive plan, in other words, just an informative.
Yeah.
And that will come with this printed document, I think, that we can just bring them up to date on something that isn't fully fleshed out yet. impact of reorganization plan on the planning board and planning department.
Not joint material.
That's what I thought.
Town
Well, I'm
managers-
sorry, what's your comment, Brian?
I think that's more of the town manager's
Yeah.
topics, if he wants to come forward with that. I don't think it's a planning board topic.
Well, there's an article in the upcoming town meeting about that, and since that's been endorsed by the Board of Selectmen, I think it would be appropriate, and actually, I would like to hear their comments about that. I think it's very important what's being proposed, and it directly affects the Community Preservation Committee, which I am the planning board representative and have been for 8 years. And this is a very important and controversial issue, and I would like to hear what the Board of Selectmen have to say about it.
Then I think it could be put on the list of potentials to be given, because remember, what we're doing is suggestions.
This is important because it's going to occur before town meeting. Our meeting with them will be
After town
after,
meeting.
that's right, I'm sorry, excuse me, I'm sorry. It'll be after that meeting.
So, I mean, we could put it, this is a listing that we're going to give to Mr. Suso to present to the selectmen in regard to what we think could be topics for our joint meeting on December 3rd.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and I think that's not something that we discuss as a joint meeting article, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, again, let's try to keep up
Yeah,
here for policy level discussions. If there are issues that individual board members want to discuss or the board wants to discuss, you can bring them up so you are fully informed about what's going on. If you want that as an agenda item tonight, planning board, you have to brief the board.
yeah. And that, I think, is a more appropriate venue.
Then you're fully informed and all.
This will probably be, the result of the town meeting will probably make a difference as to whether or not we all want that.
Okay. The other thing that Paul put in here, and I'm not again sure of what he means, is what input is needed from the planning board and planning department in review of major projects. Not sure what he means by that.
Not, again, at a tactical level, this is what we do here as a planning board or planning staff or your behalf in the regulatory environment. It's not.
Okay.
That's more internal.
Yeah.
don't you think?
Okay. So what we have from this discussion, I think, Rich, you haven't given your input yet on what you'd like to see.
I'm in agreement with what you folks are saying. I have no particular addition to any of that.
Okay. So the Spring Bars Road and the 5-year strategic plan. Okay. So those would be the two issues then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
And now, resiliency, industrial zoning, preservation, and have a handout for future agenda.
Okay.
Got it.
Great. And Marlene, your timing couldn't have been better. Marlene is going to be giving us a presentation on resiliency planning.
Going to turn the lights low again?
Yep.
Okay.
Geez, we should have brought popcorn for tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be brief tonight. I gave you a handout last meeting with some information on it. And I'm talking about resiliency in the context of planning for coastal change, generally storm created. And I really like this definition of resiliency. The term is used a lot of different ways. There's no agreed upon common definition, but I think the Rockefeller Foundation did a very good job here. And we tend to think about resiliency in terms of bouncing back from disasters, but what they're also saying is adapt and grow in the face of changes. And changes can be slow and steady over time that you almost don't notice. And I think that's an important fact to keep in mind when we're talking about land use development and slowly building and building and building and changing your infrastructure over time. And these are very long-term patterns. And then we have a big storm event that's, emblazoned in people's mind. So we're dealing on both ends of the spectrum, very slow and gradual and a very big traumatic event. And the Rockefeller Foundation is doing a lot of research in coastal resiliency because they're headquartered in New York and because of the impacts of Hurricane Sandy just a little over a year now. And if you go back to their definition, they talk a lot about systems, all sorts of systems, natural systems, infrastructural systems, social systems, and the networks that we have in place to deal with all the systems and all the networks that need to be rebuilt to have life go back to normal. And partly what we'll talk about when we get into the details is how you decouple your system so you don't have impacts rippling across and impacting multiple systems. And I think the picture in the top corner there is a good example because, clearly you're not going to catch the subway at 96th Street or 86th Street, whatever station that is. But if you notice in that picture, the lights are on. So they're decoupling their electrical system from the rest, from their transportation system. And so one thing I'm going to ask you to think about, or one thing I'm going to ask you to do is think in systems here. And we just had the anniversary of Sandy, and New York Governor, there's a quote from the New York Governor Cuomo here, and I think that the last sentence is the most important sentence, and you have to assume it will happen again. And we have to be careful to, time goes by, memories fade, you become complacent, and we have to assume that that a storm like that could happen again. And I put this picture in here. This is New Jersey, and what you noticed here is that New Jersey is rebuilding exactly the same. They're rebuilding on the beach. They're rebuilding exactly in the same place, exactly in the same way. And that's one thing I'm going to challenge you to think about as we go through this process. And when we're talking about adapting and growing in the face of changes, we're talking about some changes that we don't fully understand. This is some climate data that we're being told. Generally, the time frame we're looking at is 2100, and we're looking at essentially Massachusetts migrating somewhere between Maryland and South Carolina. That's a completely different climate. It's different animals, it's different plant species. It's a different, if we feel like Virginia or Maryland or the Carolinas, we are planning for some fairly drastic changes in our everyday normal behavior in 2100. And when we talk about resiliency, I mean, essentially, it's the ability to bounce back, or the ability to adapt, the ability to be flexible. We're not starting off in a good place. Our natural systems are under stress from habitat fragmentation, pollution, our past land use patterns. And our infrastructure is old and vulnerable. So we are, heading into flu season with a severely impacted immune system here. We're not starting from a necessarily healthy place, which gives us some challenges that we're going to have to look at. We're dealing in reality here. We have a lot of longstanding law and policy and protected vested interests who don't want things to change. They have a reason to keep things exactly the way they are. They have a reason to rebuild on the beach in New Jersey in the same footprint, in the same way, using the same methods and materials of construction. There's vested industry interests that don't want to change to accommodate the impacts of climate change and the associated storms that we're expecting. We see it all the time. Short-term profit often trumps long-term planning. And because of our system of vested rights and pre-existing non-conforming rights, we're at a disadvantage to realign our future actions with kind of maybe how we feel we should be moving, because we have a framework in place that doesn't allow us that flexibility. So we have some things to think about how we would actually go about planning for change in the future. We have some more challenges. We also have federal and state partners who sometimes are confused and uncooperative. We're broke. We have inconsistent and fragmented rules and regulations. We see that even within our own bylaws. We have literally conflicting rules about what we should do in some cases. We don't have a good understanding of the problem. We know that very smart people who study this deeply are telling us that something's going to happen. We don't know when, where, how, but we're being told that things are changing and we better get prepared for it. We have some baggage that we're carrying with us, and so we're at a good place to start, I think. And FEMA is starting. We've all had you've been hearing a lot of discussion about the floodplain policies and the National Flood Insurance Program, and FEMA is beginning to kind of revise some of those past regulatory frameworks. And flood risks are defined a couple different ways. They're shown on these different maps that are developed by FEMA. The ones that we're most used to working with are the FIRMS. Those are the maps that you think of and that we talk about when we talk about the floodplain maps, but there are other ones too. And what those maps show are these different zones. And I've defined them for you because sometimes we use these terms and maybe we don't do as good a job as we should about making sure that everybody knows what we're talking about. So the V zones are subject to storm-induced wave action. The A zones is your 100-year floodplain, and there's another zone on the maps that you may see that's the 500-year floodplain. And I think it's really important when we're thinking about resiliency through the end of the century, these maps are backwards looking. Climate projections are not influencing these maps. These are based on historical data. And the sheet I handed out last time goes into some of that too, about how it's measured and how, if it's a projection or if it's regional or if it's local. And I think that's going to be something that we're going to struggle with in the future, is that if some of the projections are on the side of the spectrum towards the worst case scenario, that we'll find that these maps could be woefully inadequate. We need to talk about our development patterns. We need to talk about the amount of investment we have on the coast, the density of people and our infrastructure. More frequent or more severe, or how exactly the storm events are going to manifest themselves, we don't know. But if we're planning for more and worse storms, we're looking at possibly a lot of damage, and not just physical damage, but damage to our businesses, damage to our economy, damage to our social networks, damage to our ecological resources. So we need to talk about some of the options to, well, one, you need to decide, do you want to adapt and evolve, or do you want to ignore the problem? If you do want to adapt and evolve, we need to talk about some of those options. The world of the future may look different, or it may look more like the world of the past. The large picture on the screen here is Hania, which is a very ancient city on the island of Crete. And I put that picture up here because literally thousands of years ago, they were on the trade route in the Mediterranean and made the economic decision to create a port there. And they did it by building a seawall, and the entire lagoon there is fortified with bulkheads. And they built a lighthouse down at the point there. And it's still there. And you can walk out there, and you can walk out the entire length of the seawall out to the lighthouse. And they're maintaining it. And so that's a structural change that has been maintained to protect that lagoon for thousands of years now. So hard engineering options are certainly viable. They're expensive, and they may not be appropriate to use everywhere, and they do cause other impacts. Nothing is shifting here anymore, nothing is eroding, and there's no littoral drift to deposit any sediment. But that's not what they cared about. They cared about creating an economic city on the trade route to Venice. We may need to think about elevating. If we're going to live on the coast, we might just need to plan for being above the water. We might need to plan on restoring some of the ecological functions that traditionally we've relied upon, marshes and lowlands, to absorb that wave energy. And we may need to reconstruct some of those. There's a lot of options. All of these options are adaptation. So we're adapting to a new reality. This is not mitigation. Mitigation would be our strategies for lowering emissions, and that's beyond the scope, I think, of the planning board. We have to plan on a future that's warmer, wetter, and has more severe storms, and how are we going to evolve and adapt to that? We need healthy ecosystems. We also need really thoughtful development decisions in the future. And that's your job, is how and where this town is going to grow to accommodate the community for 2100, and how much risk are we willing to assume for coastal storm events, and how much can we afford to pay to rebuild our infrastructure, and how quickly can we become stronger, smarter, and more sustainable with our actions. So that, in a nutshell, is some of the things to think about whether or not you want to embark on the road of talking about coastal resiliency. It's a very hot topic right now. It's not well defined. Everybody's using the term differently. You will probably need to create your own working definition on what you mean and what you're doing. But when you're talking about land for development, when you talk about planning for infrastructure, when you talk about rezoning, you need to be thinking about the long-term effects of those actions, and how will the people in 2100 who are there, how are they going to be coping and adapting to a different climate. So there aren't a lot of good examples. New York and New Jersey obviously have been doing some planning, and I sent you the links to those plans. There's not a well-developed body of plans to look at in this topic, and they're kind of soft and wishy-washy. We don't know exactly what we're planning for, and we don't know exactly what the best recommendation is. It's very site-specific, so it's hard to talk in generalities here, because a construction project for a seawall or bulkhead or breakwater might be appropriate in one location, but it might have unintended consequences at another location that are not acceptable. So we can't just assume that all of the answers lie in engineering projects, and we can't only assume that all the solutions lie in ecological, natural systems projects either. We have to find a balance that's appropriate for the particular town and the particular place within that town. So it's a difficult topic to think about. I think it's a serious topic. I don't want to have to be here. I don't want to put this away and then have to be here after the next Sandy, digging it back out. I don't think we should wait. I think there is clearly room for more research, but I think we know enough that we should begin. I don't have any right answers for you. I don't have any answers for you, actually. It will be very much like the wind turbine bylaw, where we're going to have to question your desires, really. What do you want to do? And come up with and chart our own course here, and come up with our own ideas to accomplish them. So it's kind of depressing. I don't have a lot of good news, and I'm sorry about that. But I do think it's a serious and important topic, and I think this is truly the kind of work that planning boards should be doing.
Thanks, Brendan.
I have one question. Yeah. What do you think the role of the Cape Cod Commission will be as far as all of the towns or applying some kind of a regional approach to this kind of thing? Mm-hmm. I mean, where are they right now with this? I mean, it's a hot topic. Are you talking to anybody at the Cape Cod Commission about it?
We are working with Webner and some representatives of the Cape Cod Commission. There's no particular organized focus on this. it could be coming. And I think clearly when we are talking about systems, especially, I mean, climate is a global system.
Yeah.
So we clearly need to be thinking outside of ourselves, and we need to be working with the county. I think really the scale to be working on is the New England region. And we're all connected. I think ultimately the states need to plan together for the entire coastline and how it all works together. I know that will probably never happen perfectly, but I do think that in order to have a well-informed plan that has any chance of being effective, that we need to understand how the sediments move. We need to understand how the impacts from events in Sandwich or Bourne or Mashpee will impact us and the islands. We need to, it's a bigger than a regional effort, ultimately. I don't know that we're going to be organized through the Cape Cod Commission to do anything, but I think we should certainly, participate if it does occur. And I think that you should be educated and informed to be able to be ahead of the curve and lead that process.
Will any of this be appropriate to be incorporated in our local comprehensive plan?
We're doing that right now.
Okay.
I agree.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Rich?
the salient point that was raised here by this presentation was the question. The one thing that we have to decide before we can do anything about planning is, what are we planning for? And I think Marlene made a good presentation of what we should not be planning for with the example of New Jersey, going right back and doing the same thing. I think it's long past the time when we can just presume that we're going to maintain the traditional development along the seashore. It's costly, it costs the community too much money, and it deprives the community as a whole of that value. I think it was a mistake after the storms in the last century to allow the rebuilding and the restructuring of the seashore for private use. I think that's something that we cannot, I know Jim's going to disagree with that, but I think that's something that we should not be planning for. I think we should be planning for a future, and we're looking at 100 years where eventually that's all going to be public. The seashore is going to be public, period. It's not going to take away property values, Jim, because the people who have the best views will still have the best value. But at least the shore itself, the vulnerable part of the shore itself, should be public. And I think that's something that we should be thinking of when we decide how we're going to react and adapt to the next big storm. Just my opinion.
We are dealing with that.
I agree, it does have to be a regional thing throughout New England, but we need to start here in Massachusetts first, and especially Cape Cod. I made the comment at our last meeting that we're this little spit of sand that's sticking out there. We're the most vulnerable. I mean, you can see, when you look at a map of the globe, you can see Cape Cod from space. It is very vulnerable, and I think we really need to start here, and we need to get on our state reps and senators and our local government to really step it up. This isn't something that should just be put on the back burner.
Anybody else? Rich, I know exactly what you're saying. This is coming up in our discussions on the comprehensive plan. If we had virgin land that we were dealing with, nothing on it, no property ownership, it wouldn't be so difficult. But we do have property rights that we're dealing with.
Yes, we have property rights that we deal with. We also have the power of eminent domain, which we should be much more willing to use in the public interest. We also have if we have a system, an area that's destroyed, let's take Surf Drive.
Very vulnerable.
Very vulnerable. In the next storm, let's say all of those houses on stilts are wiped out. Should they be rebuilt?
I remember before Hurricane Bob, we were told via articles in the newspaper that they couldn't be rebuilt, but there they went, up again. So
Well-
these are the things that I think we're not going to discuss tonight, I think, but
No,
this
but
is the
I'm
basis
saying-
of what we're going to have to be discussing
Like
as
I
a
said,
planning
the
board.
big question is, what are we planning for? We have to have a
Okay?
vision.
Yes, right. So this
Then we
is,
can plan.
this is, Marlene has introduced it. She's thrown the challenges out there. Our little committee of 3 is discussing it now. We will bring these ideas back to the board as a whole, and this is a little microcosm, what we heard and what we've said tonight, of what we're going to be dealing with as a board and as a community, and how we can deal with it fairly.
I was just pointing out my reaction to the
I know.
presentation, and the thing that struck me the most was that one question, what are we
Yeah.
planning for?
What are we
And that's-
planning for?
we
No
can't-
one really knows at this point definitively. And if we had that crystal ball that we could see ahead, maybe we'd rather not see what we see if we had that. So, moving on, correspondence. I have something in here that Brian said really is just a point of interest. And it has to do with a wireless communication monopole tower at 284 Old Meeting House Road, East Falmouth. Whose property is that again? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening.
Oh, the monopole.
Oh, that's Mr. Allenby's, I believe.
Okay. And this is just simply a point of interest to be brought up to the board so that we know about it. So if you want to see anything further on it, it's just,
It's a fascinating monopole.
yeah, okay? It's just for our information, and that's all. Requires no action on our part.
What's the
Okay.
property zone that it's going on?
It's light industrial there.
Yeah, the light industrial.
It's an existing monopole, and he's modifying it. By law, the Cape Cod Commission has to notify you, but you have no
Okay.
regulatory role other than at the local level, as a board of appeals.
So it's just a notification. Okay. There are no other correspondence items. What about future agenda items? Does anybody have anything specific that Brian can add to his growing list?
I think we gave him quite a list last time.
We did.
yeah,
I know, that's
so-
why I said growing list. Okay, so then could I have a motion, please?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.